With Mama Says Namaste.
All right, welcome to the Mama Says Namaste podcast. I am excited to have a special guest with me again today. This is going on our series where we're talking all about it's more than just the birds and the bees. It's just talking about sex and sexuality for ourselves and for our children. And how do we introduce this subject and broach the subject? So last week you heard from Nathan and me on how we kind of addressed it in our home. And this week I have the pleasure of having Jessica Connelly on, who is one of the founders and creators of Moon Daughters. And this was an amazing program I went through. And I asked her to come on to share a little bit just about some of the insights that I was introduced to for the first time, even in this program, and a little bit more about what she does and what she can offer for those of you who are navigating this with your children, or just looking to maybe get some more insights into your own body as well. So, Jessica, thank you for joining us today, or joining me today.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. One of my favorite topics, as you know.
Yes. So I had the pleasure of meeting Jessica. Jessica also happens to be a good friend of my brother's out in California. So I got to meet her in person a few years ago at this point when I went out to San Diego. And yes, the Moon Daughters program is an amazing program. And I want to just share a little bit about first off, your background, who you are, and kind of what made you even come to the point of creating this. And then we can kind of dive into a little bit about what things are covered, what insights there are about just understanding who we are and our connection to maybe something beyond just us as well.
Yeah. Okay. So I am a holistic coach, and I'm also an herbalist, and I've been a birth doula for 10 years. So my background is I've been accompanying women through like pretty much major transformative moments in life, from giving birth to spiritual transformations, life transformations, things like that. I'm also a mother of 4 daughters. My oldest is 13, and I have a 10-year-old, a 7-year-old, and an almost 4-year-old. So I have all the experiences of raising daughters happening in my home, from toddler wildness to, adolescence and teenage years. So basically, this is my lived experience. It's like, this is what I'm doing and want to be doing with my daughters. I want to offer them something that is, a whole, complete story. I think a lot of us, all of the women I work with, like a lot of us come to womanhood and certainly motherhood with just really fragmented understandings of our body, of sexuality, of our connection with the world outside of us, with nature and cycles. And I did too. And the Cycle Wisdom course talks a lot about connecting with the cycles around us, which is kind of like the oldest code for humanity, right? Like, I mean, this is how we've been living for so many years. But the real obvious one for us women is our menstrual cycle. And that has been such a point of contention and pain. I mean, everything from like just a full on, 40-year inconvenience to trauma is what I've seen in the women that I've worked with. So as a mom of daughters, I absolutely wanted to educate them and model for them something different. And for me, I had to go and figure out what that thing was, because I didn't even know. I just had this like intuitive knowing that there's got to be something else here. Because when I attend a woman in birth and I see the kind of like intuitive, connected power that happens in that moment, even from women that would never describe themselves as like, connected or embodied or whatever, they don't even know the terms. But in that moment, it's like the most powerful moment they have, and it changes their life. And as a doula, I began to ask the question, does this only happen in birth, which maybe some women might only do a few times in their life? Or where else in our life can we access this kind of intuition and this kind of power and this kind of inner knowing? And then after my fourth daughter was born, I knew I wasn't going to be having any more kids. And it had been, 10 to 12 years of like pretty much not having a menstrual cycle, right? Because I was pregnant and then I was breastfeeding, and then maybe I'd get my cycle for like, I don't know, a few months, and then I'd get pregnant again. So for pretty much my whole like adult life, my cycle was all about either getting pregnant or not getting pregnant. And that's pretty much all I knew that it was.
And that I think that epitomizes the essence of what a lot of us have given. I mean, that's the attention we give to it. Is simply that. Yeah, for sure.
It's that, and then it's how to manage your bleeding, right? So I mean, that's basically like the education that we know to give our daughters. Well, now you can get pregnant, so you have to figure out how to not get pregnant, and then once you want to, you have to figure out how to get pregnant, and then how to manage the fact that you're going to bleed. And that's pretty much where it ends. So after and that's what it was for me. And it was, I didn't have trauma around it personally, but that's just all I knew. And then after my fourth daughter was born and I got my cycle back again, the day that I started bleeding, it was really significant because I knew that I wasn't going to have any more kids. And all of a sudden, this thing that I've had my whole life was no longer about fertility for me. It was no longer about, this is the, opportunity to have kids, or, I mean, that was sort of off the table. And that's really where my inquiry around, there has to be something more here. I don't think that I know all of the story. I think there's something else in this story that a lot of women know, or maybe like it's just like it's ancestral wisdom. There's something here, and I felt it, and so I went out in search of that essentially. And there's a much bigger, wider story around that, and fertility certainly is it's a centerpiece, and it's super important and beautiful, but there's something else there, and it's really beautiful. And the deeper significance of the cycle within us, our physiological cycle, and how that connects to the cycles around us, and how this wisdom can actually be a guide for us as women is just mind-blowing. And it totally changed my life. And again, because I have 4 daughters, like this is not just the work I do, this is what I'm living day to day. And I knew I wanted to, around the time that I was going on this personal inquiry, my oldest daughter was, I don't remember how old she was, but she was kind of approaching that pre-adolescent time. So maybe 8-ish, 9, where when your daughter starts to get to like 8 or 9, like what I find with women is like all of a sudden there's an urgency around, okay, shoot, have I told them, when do I have the sex talk?
Right.
Have I told them
what
about
have I covered? What do they still need to know that they're going to get hit with
should
now?
She be like carrying pads when she goes to a friend's house? Like there's sort of this like little panic about, oh no, have I done the right things? Does she know what's happening? Her body might be changing. So all of this sort of collided for me in this moment of like, okay, I need to know the whole story. And I have a science background. I actually have a master's in biology. So I went on my little research rabbit trail, and what I found was that the story is so beautifully intertwined in like cutting edge science and like ancient women's wisdom. You don't have to pick, right? You don't have to just like read woo-woo books about like the moon and like, feminine power. I mean, all that is great and real, but it's grounded in actual science, and science that really changes the way we relate to our own bodies, and we relate to the cycles around us. And I loved that, because for me, that is like the most beautiful combination when there's there's grounded science along with like this intuitive wisdom that women have passed down through generations. So, I mean, essentially that's my story. And that's why I feel so passionate about this, again, because I'm living it every day. And I want to share that wisdom. And I partnered with Melissa Reeves to create Moon Daughters, and she has a lot of expertise around menstrual cycle awareness and the deeper significance of that. And I just feel like You know, I don't think there should be a generation beyond us that doesn't know this.
Mhm.
It's something that has been known for a long time, and modern culture has really changed the way that we understand our bodies and the way we relate to our cycle and sexuality. But it doesn't have to. Like we can decide to 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 integrate this wisdom into our lived experience, and we can decide to educate our daughters and give them the kind of foundation so that when they go through adolescence and when they go through womanhood and motherhood, they do it with just the whole story in place, right? It's not fragmented. It's like, well, you're going to have your own experience, and there's going to be challenges, and those challenges are actually going to, make you who you are. But like, let's start out with a whole story about who we are and what our power is in the world.
Well, and that's such a beautiful aspect. I mean, so many different elements of what you addressed there. I mean, first and foremost, just recognizing your passion about it is so. I mean, it's the same reason why I got into doing the coaching that I'm doing. I became a marriage and family coach out of my own accountability to be the mother and wife I wanted to be in my home.
100%.
And
100%.
yeah. And so it's like, well, I'm gonna have to do the research anyway. You know, if I can impart this knowledge to other people as well, and be able to, allow myself to be the guinea pig for what's working and to process through it, that's a great way for me to be able to share what light I can give to a broader audience. So such a great way for doing that. But then the other thing that you're talking about, I mean, this element of woo, and my audience knows this often because I talk about, over in the woo woo world, I definitely pick up a lot of different elements of that, and I oftentimes will take a quote unquote woo woo concept and say, let's create this let's make this a little bit more of a tangible or a real life application for you. And so much with what you're saying there, we've got to be really careful to not just throw anything that is intuitive into the woo arena or the new age arena, meaning that, oh, well, that's not for me. And for some people, that's a really quick way to write that off. And we're in a world of information overload, and there's a lot of different things to go into that. And man, time and time again on the podcast, Nathan and I are talking about that importance of trusting your intuition, paying attention to the feeling and the sensation, knowing your gut, making sure that that is still a part of it. And I know that, for me, that was a big eye opener, was me reading the book, Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom by Dr. Christiane Northrup. And when I read that, and she commented in there how even in school, and she's an OBGYN, and even in school, her like, you're taught that, women are to be fixed. There's something wrong with them. They come in because we need to fix something. We need to fix their cycle so it doesn't bother them. So let's give them the right pill to prevent it or make it as minimal of a thorn in their side as they need. There's all these things that the medical approach is coming in, that, we are already screwed up bodies. We're already something that's a pain in the butt. Like, it doesn't run well all month long, so it needs to be fixed. And me reading from her, like, me just kind of opening the door to, wait, you mean my body is doing everything that it naturally is able to do? And then her being able to pull some of the science behind it. That can be such an eye opener. And I think is such an important reminder for all of us that, no matter how big the medicine world can grow, how big science can grow and everything else, even with all of these facts and figures and all of these things behind us, we cannot discount that no one knows what the feeling of pain feels like for you, but you. Nobody knows what the feeling of something sitting right with you or resonating with you. The intuition in the gut and that side of connection is so, so powerful. Just like we can say that you can have all your basic survival needs met, but with no love, we flounder. There's more to it than just the basic stuff. So I love this opportunity to open that door again, to say that we're not saying you have to go live in woo-woo world and be in your, little red tent on the beach and only have your sage going. And, we can create fun ceremonies and enjoy and appreciate that. But it doesn't mean that you have to go to that extreme in order to be connected to who you are and see what your body can do and benefit for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not black or white, and we throw out a lot when we sort of hand that to like the uber woo woo world. And I think it's important to realize too that this idea of intuition possibly being woo woo, it's very cultural, and I think that's helpful if we can like get out of our like very like kind of egocentric cultural space and rise up a little bit. That is not necessarily a commonly held global belief. Like this has been something that humans have realized from the beginning of time, that this is a technology built into the human experience. And so it's modern culture that, we can kind of do a history dive another time, but it's kind of been in the water from a lot of different points that we've discounted this, and particularly we've discounted it in women. And so, having the science and having the research there and being able to draw on that and then be able to actually integrate that into our lives and model that for our daughters is it's a game changer. It really is.
So share a little bit about that. I mean, I guess we can start with just, you call it moon daughters. So right there, that incorporates a little bit of maybe some scientific aspects of things that not everybody knows. So this one course, and I'm focusing on this one course because I also had a conversation with Jessica ahead of this, and I know she has another course that's coming out that is going to be specifically more geared toward dealing with our children navigating through this. And we're going to have another episode that we're focused just on that. So this one is really looking at, even this idea of, okay, moons and seasons. Those two are two big aspects of moon daughters that I think is you're sharing a lot about the scientific side that is not necessarily a given. When somebody, just because someone has, or well, whatever, I mean, everybody has a female at some point in their lives. Can you share a little bit about, what is the scientific connections? What are some of those connections that we have beyond just the Bible, or not the Bible, but the books that say, we're going to have our period once a month?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So Moon Daughters is directed at women who have daughters, again, who are kind of were like me, and kind of going, oh gosh, like I know there might be more to the story, but I don't know what it is, and I want to give something to my daughter. And then there's a lot of practical integrations for actually how to do that in everyday life. So that's kind of the background of this. And the moon part of Moon Daughters is simply because we have a biological, physiological connection to the moon as women. And it's funny because obviously we all understand that there's a moon and it looks different at different times. And sometimes it's really big and full, and sometimes we can't see it at all. But the moon specifically has a bit of like woo-woo around it. And so right away in the course, like I love just bringing the science in there, because the connection between women and the moon is not an idea. It's not like a fun idea that originated at some point, and then it's not a story, it's not a fable. It's actually scientific connection that we have to the moon. And the moon cycle, as many of you may know, is 29.5 days. And that almost exactly lines up with a women's menstrual cycle, which on average is 29 days. So really interesting, right? That would be the case. And so throughout time and historically, humanity has always recognized that there's this connection to women and the moon, and the women has even been thought of as kind of a feminine energy. And along with the moon cycle, there's 4 distinct phases of the moon that we recognize. And this has been really important throughout time, because before artificial light, moonlight was a really, really like important thing for humanity, right? Whether it was like needing to harvest past sunset at the full moon, or needing light to travel. I mean, there's so many different reasons why humans have looked to the moon for light, for guidance, for a calendar and things like that. So the cycles of the moon have also been historically something that humans have kept track of and have even different energetic qualities. We all understand that the full moon has a different feel than the new moon. And that's actually where the word lunatic came from, because on the full moon, there are documented, scientifically documented, more hospitalizations, more like things like car accidents, more things like,
are there more births on the full moon?
There are more births. So as a doula, being in the birth world, we would always know, oh, full moon's coming. Like likely a lot of the mamas that are due around this time are going to go into labor around the full moon. And that's just a known thing. That is not like a hypothesis. Any midwife or someone or birth worker is going to just count on that in terms of their schedule and their business and things like that. So super interesting. And the actual connection has to do with the amount of light that the moon gives is connected to our production of melatonin. And melatonin is produced in the pineal gland, and it manages our sleep cycles. And at the full moon, that light causes us to produce less melatonin. And then that is linked to higher ovulation rates and higher conception rates around the full moon. And then conversely, when the moon is not, when it's dark, or it's called new moon, there's less melatonin production, and that is linked to a decrease in ovulation, decrease in conception, and an increase in menstruation starting. So the increase in having your bleed on the new moon. So throughout time, this has been a correlation that women have known and humanity has known, and and we have been able to count on. And then the other interesting part of that, and again, I keep going back to this idea of there's a bigger story. And because our menstrual cycles are about the same length as a moon cycle, we also have 4 phases. And there's only 2 that we really get taught. And that's the bleeding phase, right? We all know that one. That one takes center stage. Right. And then there's ovulation, and you're keenly aware of that if you're trying to get pregnant or not trying to get pregnant.
Right.
But the stages in between that, most women are not so connected with, because they aren't really center stage like these others. But there are what science would say 4 distinct stages, and they're governed by hormones, and the science of that is clear, and that's something that you can study and you can understand, and a lot of people do. But even going beneath that, women throughout time, and again, this piece of the story is that we recognize that these different phases of the menstrual cycle line up with these different seasons in our actual physiology. So understanding that can help you connect to things about yourself that used to feel really confusing, right? So like, why before my period am I so angsty? Or why is my daughter so angsty, right? Like, we can all understand that maybe before our periods, PMS, things, you feel off, you could be depressed. I mean, the symptoms there's a long list.
Oh, and boy, I can tell instantly. My fuse, I mean, I know that I tend to be impatient in general, but boy, the week before, man, I will. And I'll have those, because of having gotten to the level of awareness with it now. Yeah, I'll check myself where I'm like, oh, okay, you know what? I'm feeling a little bit extra snarky today. Like, this is a little bit too extreme. But because I'm recognizing it, now I'm able to identify when those times are and work around it. And that was an eye opener to me. Going through the course was this idea of essentially biohacking, like recognizing and this, I mean, what you're talking about, I mean, she's shared this idea of all these times that are backed by science, and in lunar phases and the different phases that we have. And I think about, I mean, how much of our world is created based on those things that we used to do. I mean, the farmers, where we have daylight savings time, and we had this for a specific reason, because of recognizing we're working with something beyond ourselves. And opening that up to seeing the scientific connection, I think in our disconnected society, where we tend to live virtually and not actually look up from a screen, this is, I think, that's why this is something that is just like mind blown for some people, because we've lived outside of this for so long where we aren't connected to it. And that was, I mean, my two biggest things that I got out of going through the course was that the eye-opening aspect of, oh, I'm a part of something way bigger than me. And what I am doing can be reflected on a global level of seasons and changes. And there's so much that's similar. So in doing that, that opens up your own awareness to your interconnectedness to everyone else, as well as opening that door for giving myself a lot more grace because of what you're talking about right now, the hormonal changes and the fact that maybe that PMS month or PMS week is not the week to be, trying to make amends with somebody I have little patience for on a regular day.
Totally. And then even like if we think about the things that feel broken, like finding beauty in that, right? And I think a lot of us women have been told that our cycles in general are broken, like you were saying,
Mm-hmm.
but this PMS time is also broken. But here's the thing, like the deeper wisdom around that time, yes, it's angsty, yes, it's not comfortable, but when you start to tune in with what's happening, what you realize is that during that time of your cycle, that angstiness is bringing up emotions and things that you're ready to deal with, right? We all are carrying shadows, brokenness, things that, at some point we want to deal with. And that time in our cycle is actually a time to sort of unearth, to sift, and to let those things come to the surface. And yes, it's uncomfortable, but we can do hard things. And they actually, I look at those hard emotions as little guides, because I get this really ugly feeling, and I'm able to now understand that my own body is guiding me to heal, and emotionally. Sometimes it's with stuff with my partner, tension I have with my husband. Things will come up, and I'll go, oh, interesting. So instead of letting it like completely tidal wave me and tank me, I'm able to go, oh, okay, yes, I'm in this part of my cycle. Interesting that this is coming up. And then allow it to come to the surface and allow it to be released. And that has been the most like profound part for me. And here's the one other thing I want to say about this part of the cycle and intuition, because we were just talking about intuition and how there's actually science behind it. And I want to tell you what that is. During that part of your cycle, the luteal phase, also called inner fall, before you bleed, the angsty PMSy phase, the separation, the little membrane that separates the two hemispheres of the brain becomes thinner in women during this part of the menstrual cycle. And that actually scientifically allows for women to be more intuitive during this time. So not only are, things coming up, and I know you feel angsty, but your intuition scientifically is at its peak. And that's beautiful. Like, what a way to reframe something that has been told to us that that it's a curse.
Right. I mean, what a way to claim that power back and to say, I can use this for my benefit. And I talk about this when it comes to understanding our different behavioral tendencies, that we have these default emotions we can sit in. And so, my behavioral tendencies tend to default in a certain way. And that means that my default emotion I hold on to oftentimes is anger. And I can look at that, and for another style, it's fear. Well, anger and fear both can get very negative, but I mean, fear is what keeps you safe. Fear can fuel you forward. Anger, oh my gosh, boy, have I used my anger as momentum to, make my house spotless or to get that project accomplished or anything else. So even these perceived negativities in our lives, and PMS being a negative, maybe it's not. It's that reminder of, okay, I'm going to be super sensitive. And so now I have that opportunity to draw awareness to where is the sensitivity that maybe I need to address this time, or what has come to the surface to process through, for sure. Exactly. Oh, I love that.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. And really all it takes is that awareness that you've been talking about, Ashley, of going, oh, I have, there's this whole sort of beautiful physiological cycle that's full of wisdom that's guiding you. So it's just bringing awareness to what's already happening. So you're not having to go out and do anything. You know what I mean? Like, to have this kind of guidance system that is hardwired within you, it's really a gift. Like, there's so much that we have to like go out and figure out and do and seek and, but we really do have this internal guidance system that all we have to do is sort of turn that awareness. It's mostly facing outward, inward for a minute, and go, okay, what's actually happening here? And how can I connect with what's already happening? And then use that to help me make my way in the world, or help my daughter make her way in the world. And
Right.
it's really powerful.
Right. I mean, seeing that even going through this and going through, there can get that level of overwhelm. And I know that us mamas especially can put that overwhelm on ourselves. Okay. And so now, I have not thought about my period and all that stuff. And now I'm dealing with, girls coming into this phase. I've got to figure it all out. And now I've got to like biohack and know every element. And this is really
Totally.
overwhelming.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is exactly right. It's simply like bringing it to awareness is the first step. And I have noticed that I might not have done my full, flow chart and done and identified every single step. But simply the fact that I am aware of these different seasons in my life and in my cycle has given me more grace for the recovery that I need. And I have found way more fulfillment and ease in what I'm doing simply by the fact that I just gave myself permission to do the things that need to be done, where I recognize that there is a week that I'm more productive, that I am going to get that my task list done. And so that week I'm going to push myself and challenge myself a little bit more on my productivity versus when I am in my recovery stage and I am now very intentional about finding something that is a completely inward process that's just for me, that I do every time I'm in my cycle. And I am completely, sitting in my, it's not, chocolate and TV boob tube sort of deal, but it is it's my chocolate and TV, it's my fun enjoyment that recharges me. And I give myself 100% permission, because I know that the counterbalance of this time of rest and recovery is that amazing productivity time that I know that I do have in the same season, in the same cycle.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And so this is exactly how to apply this kind of wisdom is what you're saying, because you can use it to actually plan your life. And what you just described about, I have this season of productivity and then I have this season of recovery. Well, you're describing a cycle. Like, our whole world is filled with cycles. You can't get away from them. I mean, inhale, exhale, right?
Right.
Fall, winter, spring, summer. So all of us are familiar with that. But for some reason, we expect ourselves, and, maybe particularly women, but I know this applies to men too, to always be in this like outward expanded, and I will say like full moon phase. Productivity all the time, every day. There's no resting, right? And we even there's like a value placed on how busy we can be. And so what this wisdom does is it flips that on its head. And it says, actually, there's a hardwired way within you to approach to life, to approach productivity. And when you actually give yourself that time of recovery, your productivity is probably double during the time that you're in the time of your cycle, probably where you're wired for it. So you don't actually, there's no loss in this. And when we take that time for self-care and we take that time for recovery, then it fuels us up to then begin that next cycle. And I'm just going to tell you that it works. It works, and there's just more alignment. There's more peace. You feel better. The people around you feel better because you're not burnt out all the time hitting the wall. And kind of taking this full circle back to the moon. When you step outside and look up at the moon, the full moon's really beautiful and kind of fun, right? Because the sun sets, and now you have a little bit more sunlight or light coming from that full moon. But the moon can actually kind of help us remember this, because the moon doesn't stay full right?
Mm-hmm.
There's no like value placed on, well, full moon is better than waxing moon, or full moon is better than new moon. So there's kind of like this gentle little reminder that there are times for things. There are seasons for things. In fact, that whole idea of like everything has a season, that's like ancient wisdom
Mm-hmm.
that humans have been passing down forever. And then there's this this actual physical symbol in the moon to remind us, like, yes, sometimes you're gonna be full and expanded and super productive, and sometimes it's just okay to rest.
Mm-hmm.
And again, thinking about not only ourselves, and this is life changing for us as mothers, but thinking about passing that wisdom on to our daughters is really profound for me, because the story of you're only valuable when you're like absolute, when you're just producing all the time and just don't stop. And the women who don't stop, like, they're going to get further and do more and be more powerful. Like, that is just a losing message. Like, nobody wins in that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we've talked about a lot. We've talked about the moon and periods and menstrual cycles, but the reason why is that this is all connected.
Right.
It's all connected.
And that's where, even last week where we addressed, it's not just the talk. Sex and sexuality is an aspect of who we are. I mean, it's an element of who we are, and even deeper than that, our intuition. I mean, there are these ancient elements that have been there forever. I'm thinking even just as a challenge to those of you listening, if you have not really sat with this idea and even thought about maybe interconnectedness with everything, I challenge you, even just over the next moon cycle, to go outside and sit outside, spend 5 minutes in the dark through every cycle, just sitting outside and experience what light is shed when you see a full moon and how everything is illuminated and you see things in that way. But then go out there in a no moon environment with no moon out there and see what may come alive and what is different. And just, that's a very literal experience to take that first step into feeling those different feeling sensations even within your own body. And so, anytime we can, and I use those exercises oftentimes about going outside, stepping outside and grounding ourselves, anytime that we can step outside of our body and see that, it's not just us being crazy. Like, everything has seasons. Our world has seasons, and we have different, ages that we go through, whether it's the Industrial Revolution or the tech information era. I mean, we have stages and seasons and phases we go through. We have seasons and phases in our lives, whether it's maybe a time of fertility in our lives, or whether it is our postmenopausal lives or our toddler years. There are seasons in our lives. There are seasons every year in our weather, and there are seasons in our relationships. And we'll see that where our relationships will ebb and flow and maybe experience different seasons, some which are maybe easier than others. When we start to see cycles and seasons, I have definitely experienced that helps in understanding and reframing. It also allows for a lot more grace and understanding, because whatever is right now, but is not where it always will be either. And so recognizing those cycles can allow for some kind of having that grace in the constant that's there, that we're going to have change regardless. So the more that we can bring our awareness to it, use a little bit more insight into it, the better we're going to be able to navigate the inevitable change that's always going to come.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. I love the word that you used, peace, because I think it does exactly that. It brings peace, and even, I would say, a resonance, because when you start to live in alignment with kind of the way even like the whole natural world functions, there's this resonance and almost this exhale of like, oh, this feels better.
It does. Oh man.
The other night was full moon, and that night I was experiencing like just so much angstiness. Like, I was just kind of anxious about things and a little grumpy, and it bothered me because I couldn't put my finger on it. Like, my husband was like, what is going on? And kind of trying to help me get out of it. And I just couldn't identify what was happening, because there wasn't like a thing that had happened or anything. but I just couldn't, you know, when you just get kind of angsty and just can't shake it.
Right.
And then finally I was like, oh, I'm just going to go outside. You know, like you were saying, I just need to like walk outside for a second and kind of ground. And I knew that it was full moon, but it hadn't been top of mind. Like I don't walk around like constantly like any of you.
We're
like
human, even though, yes,
Yeah.
even somebody who is an expert in this arena does not live in charting your calendar
No, I
24/7.
mean, that's not
Exactly.
reality. It's not reality.
Right.
I was just really hung up in my own angstiness of my life in that moment. So I walk outside, it's dark, and I just kind of go outside and I look up and I remember like, oh wow, like beautiful. It's full moon. And as I'm looking at the moon and just standing there, I had like this immediate relief. And here was the thing, like the thing about full moon, and as I explained earlier, even the science of it is that it's powerful. It also like pulls the Earth's crust and causes our tides. Okay, so it dawned on me that I've been doing a lot of work to try to get in alignment with cycles, and so my body was actually just responding, and my emotions were actually responding to the kind of alignment that I brought into my life. And at that moment, I had a total awareness of exactly the like angsty part of my life that was coming up that just wanted to be expressed and aired. And it had to do with balance around, you know, I'm homeschooling my 4 kids, and I'm also like running a business and building a business, and you know, there's like this constant balance that sometimes just feels like a juggling act that us mamas go through that, you know, I'm sure you can all relate to. And I was feeling some angstiness about that. And when I got out there and looked at the full moon, it kind of like I almost imagined like a tide, like it sort of just drew it out of me. And now that thing's not gone. I will 100% promise you I'm going to feel angst about that same thing. But I just needed to like release it in that moment. And the moon was like a symbol for me. It was just like I just had this immediate relief of like, oh, that's what's going on. All right, cool. And so all it was bringing awareness to it that allowed me to completely just sort of release. And I went on with the rest of my night, and you know, was able to dance with the reality of my angst in a way that felt a lot better and good. Right? It's not about just getting rid of these things. It's about having right relationship to them. So that's just an example for me personally recently of a time where I the moon as a symbol was helpful, but also like the energetic connection scientifically was helpful as well to help me move through something that is just one of those things that I carry and have angst about sometimes.
and moonlight is definitely beneficial for helping with that process of kind of getting in sync with who you are, is actually going out there and bathing in the moonlight.
Totally, absolutely.
Yeah. And the other thing is just that reminder of, in our do society, in our constantly moving and going, you know, I mean, sometimes it's that, I mean, we always go back to awareness, because awareness oftentimes forces you to stop in the moment. When you're aware of something that's brought to your awareness, you pause and you're present. That's just a reminder constantly. I mean, are you able to pause and be present and allow for the treats, allow for the rest and the recovery and those different things, and acknowledging that. I was talking with a coaching client this past week about that, and her my encouragement for her with her and her son for this week was to celebrate tiny wins. Not the big accomplishment, but you know, something super simple, you know, allowing her child, who tends to live in more of an adult world, letting him, you know, accomplish a 7-year-old win of jumping across a creek. And that is something that, you know, we don't move on from. We allow some celebration for it. The older we get, the more practical we get with not celebrating things. And yet I have found that those who have, you know, gotten this element of understanding intuition, of understanding how to bring awareness to the moments, the ones that I see that are flowing in happiness And not that their lives are perfect, not that they never have other things happen, but that tend to be flowing in abundance in their lives. They tend to be the ones who prioritize celebration and recovery and rest just as much, if not more so, than hustle and get things done. And having that balance. I mean, recognizing that yes, we balance things, and there are cycles that go through. We have to have those. We have to have those opportunities to recharge and to give ourselves grace to do it. And I think understanding this stuff is sometimes that that little justification or permission slip we need. So I'm encouraging everyone who's listening to this, this is your permission slip to dig deeper into this. And if you're wanting to learn more about understanding your cycle and understanding your own relationship, and I'm saying this with full understanding and happiness that this is not just women listening, and that there are a lot of men who are listening to this, because for every male that's listening to the podcast, you have a female in your life in some shape or form, whether it's your mother, your partner, your children, a sister. You're going to have females that are present in your life. I mean, recognizing this, honoring and respecting this, and the fact that it's not just females that have seasons. Males do have seasons they go through as well.
Really. And I would add too that even if you don't have a menstrual cycle, and you're a woman, you also are going through these same seasons, and the moon is the guide for those, and one that can connect you back to that, whether you don't have a cycle because you're taking medication that prevents that, or maybe you're beyond having a cycle. It doesn't exclude you from this kind of cycle wisdom. And so, and men included, and the moon is actually going to be your primary guide to move through those seasons. So that's really important. I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah. So yeah, just understanding, these different elements can be such an eye opener for just adding some more grace and awareness into our lives on a regular basis. So any last thoughts you have or insights as far as first off, also not just Moon Daughters, but how can they learn more about any of the services that you offer, and any last words you'd like to share?
Yeah. Well, you can find me at moondaughters.com, and that will give you, there's a couple downloads there. There's some conversation starters, because I know a lot of what feels hard is well, how do I even start these kinds of conversations with my daughter? So there's some free downloads. There's also access to the course. You can learn more about it there. I also have an Instagram account. It's moon.daughters. So you can kind of follow some of the daily life of my, little urban beach homestead here with my 4 daughters and 5 chickens and dog. So I'd love to just connect with you on those platforms. And like Ashley said, I'm going to be launching a mini course called Creating Sexual Legacy. So extending this wisdom into the, kind of the taboo world of how do we talk to our daughters about sexuality, and even more, how do we see that as something that is good and beautiful and part of their humanity and design. So look for that. I'm excited for that.
And this podcast episode is definitely a 3-part series. So you heard, and this is video as well. And yeah, I'm very eager to share all of these, because not just are we going to, have we shared Nathan's and my personal journey, but now this interview here, and then next, the third part of this series is that exact thing. I mean, what is our legacy going to be with our children, and how do we maybe stop the stigma that we had, or the trauma that we had, and create something different in this? And that is a whole beautiful conversation we hope you tune into next week, because man, all of this stuff is so valuable. You cannot avoid this in your life. This is a part of nature. This is a part of who we are. It's such a beautiful part.
Yes, I agree. I would love to leave you with a quote, if I could.
Yeah.
It's a Native American quote, and I can't find the actual author, else I would love to give credit. But Indigenous cultures have given us so much wisdom around how to honor everything that we talked about today, right? How to honor our bodies, how to honor specifically the cycles within our bodies instead of just sort of grit our teeth and bear it. And I've looked to that research a lot to help kind of rewire my own understanding around it, so that I can give my daughters a story that is beautiful and empowering about them and their bodies. So the quote I want to share is this. It says, at her first bleed, a woman meets her power. During her bleeding years, she practices it, and at menopause, she becomes it. And I feel like that it wrapped up in that is, again, this total reframe of how we look at this thing that has, been told to a lot of us that might be a curse. And this is reframing it to say, no, this is your power. And even reframing menopause, like that's when you step into your power. So, much love to you as you practice your power and, bestow that power upon your daughters and share that story of power.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much for being on with me today, Jessica. I can't wait to carry on the conversation in our next interview where we talk about this, leaving this legacy beyond us and how we can create some new stories around this. So for everyone listening, yes, remember to reclaim your power and be aware of it and get present with it today. And of course, that same tagline we leave every time. Doing this, brings us more awareness, grace, and understanding for ourselves. And it also can help to highlight how the uniqueness in each of us strengthens all of us. Namaste.
1, 2, 3. Up with the rising sun, already on the run. Mama says namaste. Life is a tangled mess, and you don't have to stress. Mama says namaste. 'Cause today I will stand up and be all the change that I want to see in this world. Boys and girls, you gotta have to stand up to be